Good evening. So the concept that I've decided to cover is the influence of social media and social comparison in regards to self-concept. A study was conducted to test whether chronic exposure to social media influences an individual's self-concept, specifically whether having a healthier and more successful group of Facebook friends and thus newsfeed activity led to upward social comparisons and ultimately a diminished self-concept as a result. The study was designed to test two key factors with regard to self-concept. First off, whether the extent of exposure influenced self-concept, so whether more time spent scrolling through social media left an individual more prone to develop a negative self-concept, whereas less time didn't affect them as much maybe, and secondly, whether the type of activity viewed on social media contributed to their self-concept. For example, whether more positive and proactive behavior, such as references towards healthy food, volunteering, and so forth, led to more negative self-concept via upward social comparison, whereas maybe unhealthy behaviors such as pictures of junk food and so forth led to a more positive self-concept via downward social comparison. Two separate studies were conducted to test this. The first study was conducted using a correlational approach and assessed the effects of chronic exposure to social media. A group of college students were given surveys assessing their Facebook usage and were then given a set of questions from a self-esteem scale to complete. Lastly, they were asked questions pertaining to the extent in which they compared themselves to others on Facebook. Study 2 was then conducted using an experimental design and was designed to test whether certain information would cause participants to engage in upwards comparison. Participants were exposed to fake social media accounts using various forms of content, which was prone to warrant comparison in order to see whether or not this were to affect the individual's overall well-being and self-concept, specifically to test what type of content was most likely to lead towards upwards comparison. The total sample size was 140 college students, all of them from the same Midwestern university. So according to the results, it was concluded that there was in fact a strong correlation between the exposure of constructive content, such as healthy habits being posted on Facebook, and upward social comparison. This form of comparison was also linked to a more negative self-concept. Likewise, it was found that the more time spent on social media, the more negative individuals tended to rate their self-concept. Overall, this experiment was important because it showed just how strong the relationship is between social comparison and self-concept. The more that we are exposed to content which causes us to compare ourselves to others, such as that found on social media, the higher the likelihood of a conflict between current and ideal self, thus negatively impacting our self-concept. In order to accurately expand research on this topic, it would be wise to follow a similar experimental design, only with a larger sample size, perhaps that of maybe 500 individuals and a more diverse population, rather than sticking to one population, because college students from the same university would be too similar of a category. It would be wise to obtain data from individuals of various age groups, different parts of the country, and so forth. The more diversity among participants, the more accurate the data will be. Additionally, an excellent addition to this experiment would be the completion of a personality assessment to see whether certain personality types are more prone to developing a negative self-concept due to social comparison. Presumably, more outgoing and confident individuals would be less likely to be negatively impacted by upward social comparison. This type of expansion would not only enhance the accuracy of results, but significantly improve our ability to understand the concept of social comparison with regard to personality.